Okay, so it's been such a long time. There was a bunch of stuff that just popped up on there that I wasn't expecting. Just throwing that out there. So, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the 5280 Podcast. We're all finally back together. Woohoo! How you guys doing?
Yeah, doing well.
Doing great.
A lot has certainly happened, in the sense of, some of the Broncos related stuff. NCAA 25 came out on Monday. The world is back to normal now that we have an NCAA college football game. All is right in the world.
There you go.
Except my world, because I'm a PC gamer and they didn't give us that game yet.
Sucks to suck.
Yeah, seriously.
See, I see. So I got this thing on here saying that we're not live on Twitter because it requires a premium account. So now we have to pay to go live on Twitter.
Thanks, Elon.
Jerks. Well, I'm not starting you. So we'll go through a couple things, and then we've got a pretty cool show. Instead of just talking about where the Broncos rank and all that, we're going to kind of build the NFL and see where everybody ranks as a team. But first things first, and I'm not going to get too political because we try to avoid politics when talking about football. But obviously everybody saw what happened on Saturday, and I think I can easily say as a network and as a podcast, we do not condone anything that happened on Saturday. It obviously, the left and the right have gone way too far, and we need to meet back in the middle and just be respectful and just run it like a political race, not like a trash campaign on either side. If you guys have anything you want to add to that, be my guest.
No, I'm good.
Yeah, we're good. Yep.
Okay. Moving on from that, did you guys hear about that Terrell Davis situation on his flight with his family?
Just briefly, yeah. Crazy situation.
So from what I gathered from reading it, it sounds like Terrell's son had asked for a glass of ice. And I don't know if the stewardess didn't hear them or what happened, but went past their row. Terrell turned around, tapped him on the shoulder, and the guy started yelling, "Ouch, don't hit me," or something to that effect, and then just kind of disappeared. And then when the flight landed, FBI came on the plane, put Terrell in handcuffs in front of his family, in front of everybody, and then took him out. And then I guess when they were questioning him, it came out that the flight attendant hadn't been too truthful. And so they let him go and apologize. But he was pretty upset, and I completely understand why.
Well, it's one of those situations where, he tried to get ahead of it with his statement. That's how I even heard about it in the first place from Terrell. But his concern is that people were videoing what was happening. He's a very famous player, Hall of Famer. He's basically been in the public eye for, the better part of 30 years and without any sort of negative, press or anything like that. And sure enough, once it hit TMZ, even after his statement, even after, United had apologized, I think there's going to be some further litigation happening here. Mm-hmm. But even you read the comments on the TMZ post, and people were all ill-informed, and they're blaming Terrell, and it was exactly what his worst fears were being somewhat realized by some of the ill-informed public about his role in the whole situation. It was just really, really unfortunate, and I'm glad I'm glad he got out ahead of it, and hopefully he gets what's owed to him for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And then kind of switching topics from that, those are the two negatives I found. But it did come out that Brandon Ayuk is wanting to be traded from the 49ers. Any shot that the Broncos could land Brandon Ayuk?
It's definitely a greater than zero chance, but I don't think that Ayuk ultimately ends up getting traded. And if he does, he's made it pretty clear that he wants to go to the Washington Commanders. He is smitten over Jaden Daniels. He's somehow got access to Commanders practice film. I don't understand why he would want to go to the Commanders, aside from Jaden Daniels, but he's clearly pretty smitten about it based on his social media activity. The Pittsburgh Steelers have also been named as a top destination for him. The Denver Broncos, rumors have been kind of circulating ever since. I believe it was the 33rd team put out a post on Twitter that named the Broncos as one of 5 destinations for Ayuk. And sure, from the Broncos' perspective, at least on the field, it makes sense. But Ayuk is in this situation to begin with because he wants a big contract. And right now, is Denver in position to give a big contract to Brandon Ayuk when we still have to extend PS2, we still have to extend Quinn Miners, we still have to fill whatever holes we need to fill. We've got some young wide receivers on this roster. I think that this wide receiver group is very intriguing. I don't think that they need to invest such significant resources as they would have to give up before even thinking about extending him in a player like Brandon Ayuk. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me personally.
Yeah, and one reason why the Commanders are number one in terms of destination also is Adam Peters is the general manager down there, and obviously Peters came from San Francisco, and so that's really easy to kind of use that as a connection. But the Commanders were a pretty logical destination, I would say, the moment Jaden Daniels came there, and especially with all the videos and stuff that came out. I'm actually on the fence of I would love Ayuk in Denver, and it's just it gets interesting because I understand the resources argument of it, and it's one that is probably its strongest, just in the simple fact of it that it's you're going to be giving up probably a first round pick for it, and do they want to do that necessarily? And are we talking about, just one first round pick or multiple? I probably would stand firm with just one first round pick. But the conversation is really just going to be, pushed on the idea of, I think for me, Brandon Ayuk is 100% worth a first round pick. He is worth a first round pick. The question just becomes when you plan ahead, in terms of future positions that you're going to be looking at in terms of the roster, are you without a shadow of a doubt certain that Garrett Bowles will be gone? And obviously that's an assumption, but Garrett Bowles will be gone. If he is gone, then you probably may want to stand firm and hold your first round draft pick and then invest in either a wide receiver there or possibly a tackle, which, I mean, I don't fault that by any means, but, it's a conversation that we've had numerous times. The Broncos really do lack an absolute, a top dog at that position. Ayuk very much gives them that. And the question just becomes, do you ship off Courtland Sutton for Brandon Ayuk? I would venture to guess that you don't necessarily even need to trade Courtland, to the 49ers. And frankly, I would venture to guess the 49ers probably don't, in air quotes, need Courtland Sutton, given the fact that the resources that they've, poured in. But I said before, I think that the Brandon Ayuk situation isn't necessarily the only wide receiver that it's worth monitoring here. The Deebo Samuel situation is worth monitoring. The Ayuk situation is worth monitoring. So I think it would be very beneficial for the Broncos to certainly kick the tires. But ultimately, I'm with Gage. I think that if there's any sort of end result here, I think it's about, him standing firm with the 49ers, staying with the 49ers. The thing that is just so different and why we live in a completely different world than we do, who's drafted 10 minutes ago. And as it correlates to the wide receiver contracts, Justin Jefferson's contract has just ballooned everything. So in trading for Brandon Ayuk, you're also going to be making that firm commitment and also extending him too. Is it really worth the investment of giving him a possible $28 to $30 million a year contract, at the expense of, the money that he's really wants? I mean, It's just when you're investing in top dollar like that, is that truly the investment that you want? And in the Broncos case, from strictly the Broncos case, they have to look at it from the standpoint of, if they truly believe in Bo Nix, which, I mean, that's the thing. If they truly believe in Bo Nix, I don't fault that idea. You have him on a rookie contract. You can at least bring in Brandon Ayuk and have him, be that wide receiver, that top wide receiver. And I think to a certain extent, wide receiver, maybe not to the same level as tackle and edge rusher and quarterback and, those positions. Wide receiver has kind of risen up in terms of, valuable positions, in the NFL right now in terms of wide receiver one. So I don't fault the idea of, people, certainly clamoring for Brandon Ayuk in Denver, myself included in that.
Which is fair, but I'll also say, and you mentioned it as well, like if the Broncos were to maybe move on from Garrett Bowles, then you have to have that conversation of, okay, maybe we can get that wide receiver in the draft, invest that first round resource there. You have the benefit also of the wide receiver being younger and have the ability to grow with Bo Nix. Then you can invest those free agent resources into a left tackle. I know that he's not the sexiest option on the planet, but Cam Robinson is an impending free agent this coming offseason, the starting left tackle for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And he's not the greatest in the world, but he's certainly serviceable, and the Broncos could probably get him on a fairly affordable free agent deal. I imagine there's somebody else out there that could hit free agency. There are some big names. It's just the question is, are those teams going to extend them? Taylor Decker for the Detroit Lions, I think he's a high priority to extend, but they've already invested a lot of money into extending guys like Penei Sewell. Maybe the Broncos could steal Taylor Decker from the Detroit Lions. There's options in free agency for like tackle, and that would at least give you the option, sign a tackle in free agency, and then wide receiver, invest those resources in the draft, because we've seen these teams, like the Buffalo Bills, they elected to move on from their highly paid wide receiver in Stephon Diggs and draft a young wide receiver in Keon Coleman and bring in a committee of other players, which you could argue Denver already has that committee of other players. They just kind of need that first round rookie to insert, and maybe Troy Franklin is that quasi first round rookie that they're inserting, even though they got him in the fourth round. That's something else we have to consider here. I just think that approach is a little bit more sustainable than having a highly paid wide receiver on your roster, plus giving up a first round pick to get him.
Right, I'm with Gage. I mean, the whole Ayuk acquisition is completely unappealing to me on multiple levels. For example, we finally have a full complement of draft choices next year. Why we would want to give it up for a guy that's then going to be making $30 million plus in a position that is now becoming similar to the running back position, where you're going to see teams, in my opinion, ratchet back from overpaying these guys because they don't need to. I don't have the facts on this, but I would venture to guess that Ayuk's contract would probably be pretty comparable for 1 year to the entire wide receiver roster the Broncos have, including Courtland Sutton's contract. I bet it's somewhere in the same neighborhood to have our entire grouping of potential starting wide receivers versus 1 year with Ayuk. A hard no for me.
Well, I don't have a problem bringing in Brandon Ayuk, but my question kind of goes along with what Cam was saying. Like, where do you put him? Where does he fit in? Like, it's great to have a room full of riches, but having like 6 or 7 starting wide receivers could be more of a problem than a solution.
In fairness, the Broncos have a room of Robins right now. Ayuk is a Batman.
Okay.
Yeah.
But do we fully know, though? Because we don't know what Mims can do. We don't know what Troy Franklin can do. Can Courtland Sutton turn that corner? How does Tim Patrick look after the injury? Like, do we have a Batman? Do we know if we do or not?
I mean, the last couple of years of what we've been able to see, or even the Broncos' history of wide receiver post Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders will tell you, no, they've never really, or I should say, Cortland Sutton's year of 2018, 2019. When he put up 1,000 yards with 3 quarterbacks. I mean, aside from that particular year, no, the answer is truly no. And I think that if you're looking at it from the just the developmental side of it, that's where I think it really would enjoy the fact that the Broncos are going to be going down that route. So like the Troy Franklins, the Marvin Mims, like I think it is very appealing, very, very appealing for the Broncos to truly go with a developmental stage. And maybe that is actually the route that Sean wants to go. But I do know for a fact the Broncos do need a top dog at that position. And maybe it is T. Higgins. I still think that there's some other. I still think that there's some other options available. And I mentioned Deebo Samuel earlier. He's certainly still another name to be floating around as far as another option. But the 49ers have kind of operated a bit differently. In the sense that there's been players that have asked to be traded, and yet they ponied up and paid them. Nick Bosa certainly got close to that, but it never really got to that point of, truly asking to be traded, and yet he still ended up getting extended. So it just seems like it could be possibly leaning one way or another that he's still going to be staying with the 49ers.
Yeah. And I want to, could you bring up that comment again about Ayuk being the 4th option in San Francisco? Because I disagree with that notion. He was their number 1 wide receiver. Deebo Samuel was more like a gadget player. Him and Christian McCaffrey are basically interchangeable. You can put Deebo out wide. You can put him in the slot. You can put him in the backfield. You can literally do the exact same stuff with Christian McCaffrey. They basically have the exact same player times 2 in those 2 guys. And they still needed a guy to be their number 1 wide receiver, and that's the role that Ayuk filled. Yes, they had George Kittle as well, who was obviously a big part of their offense, but they run their offense in a lot of heavier personnel, a lot of 2 tight end sets, a tight end and Kyle Juszczyk, who kind of acts as a quasi tight end option, and then a running back. They just run a lot more heavier personnel, but that doesn't mean that Brandon Ayuk isn't a number 1 receiver. He could go and be a number 1 guy pretty much anywhere. And he is the number 1 wide receiver, I feel like, in San Francisco.
Yeah, and I think that to piggyback off of that, Gage, the reason why the 49ers offense is so appealing to a lot of players is it's a positionless offense. Now, the thing with that is, with it being a positionless offense, you still need a true wide receiver. You still need a true wide receiver that's going to be your number 1, and that's where guys like a Jawan Jennings, a Brandon Ayuk, like those are players that are so enticing to a team like that. Now, granted, Jawan Jennings is the dirty work wide receiver, but Brandon Ayuk is truly the guy that really feels like he's that number 1 wide receiver, and that's clarification. Yeah, it may not be the 4th. He may be the 4th option on a team that is just based on solely positionless players, but I would gladly take Brandon Ayuk, as a number 1 option on far many other teams. But the only reason why he possibly is that 4th option is because it's a positionless offense.
Would you say that Jawan Jennings is like the Tim Patrick of the 49ers?
1,000%.
Yep. The dirty work wide receiver, blocks his ass off, does all the stuff that casual fans won't necessarily appreciate, but one of the hardest workers on the team. And that's Tim Patrick.
So since Spence jumped into the chat, I don't normally do this, but I'm going to because it's Spence and I have to.
To alcohol, the cause of and solution to all of life's problems.
Just for you, buddy. All right, so kind of getting into the main part of the show, we're going to rank all of the teams. All the teams according to whether they suck or not. So I've got this tier maker all pulled up here, and you see there's Super Bowl contenders, playoff teams, average teams, below average, and number 1 pick contenders. So if one of you wants to run comments, because I'm not really going to be on this screen, I'll be on the other one. If they pop up, but let's just go ahead and start from the beginning. We'll go with the Cardinals. I'm
Below
thinking
average.
I'm thinking here.
I agree with that.
Mm-hmm. I
Because
agree.
you still don't know what you've got with Kyler Murray. New coach this year, right? Or that was
No,
last year?
Jonathan Gannon's second year.
No, I think
for
okay.
him.
Okay. Yeah, I think below average is fair. Now, this is the one that I keep seeing ranked like up here. And I don't quite understand why. Like, I know you have Kirk Cousins. But aside from that,
They have some really great weapons. And they have a good offensive line. Their defense is questionable. That is what really kind of makes me on the fence when it comes to the Falcons. They have a questionable pass rush. Their secondary could use another piece or two. They've got Jesse Bates and they've got I cannot remember AJ Terrell. They've got two good pieces, but they could use another starter there. Them not adding an edge rusher this offseason, taking Michael Penix, which was a luxury pick when you needed an edge rusher, you needed a defense, and you took a defensive lineman in the second round, but you took the wrong one. You should have taken Johnny Newton.
At least from what we can tell right now, yeah.
Yeah, from what we can tell right now, obviously we've never seen these guys play, but I want to put them almost in average because we don't really know. They've got the potential to kind of swing either way.
Yeah, I think that the reason here's the reasoning for me to be putting them at a playoff team. Division. Like division would be the reason why you would want to put the Falcons
over the Bucs.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's actually, I think that it's the Falcons and Bucs in terms of competing for that division. I think Carolina is better, but but they're not first overall pick better by any means, or top 3 pick better. But I just think that based on that, division, I think it very much swings things to average or playoff. So the fact that we have them average right now is not a slam on Kirk Cousins. It's not a slam on their weapons. It's not a slam on the offensive weapons that they have. It's just more so it's the NFC also, and mostly
and new coach.
Division. Yeah. So
that too. But again, man, I think they have the highest ceiling in that entire division.
Ooh.
I would agree with that.
I agree with that
With
too.
those weapons, absolutely they do.
Mm-hmm.
Best rookie backup quarterback in the league too.
Ravens. I'm leaning here.
Yes,
I would
Gotta
agree.
be.
Yeah. I mean, they got better. Rumor is actually swirling that Justin Simmons actually might be in conversation with the with the Baltimore Ravens, which actually would be crazy because Kyle Hamilton and Justin Simmons, two of the actual freakiest wide receivers on the planet, on one backfield.
Freakiest wide receivers?
Sorry,
Or safeties.
Safeties, sorry. We got talking about playmakers, safeties. And so, but I mean, they also added Derrick Henry, improve the running game, take pressure off of Lamar Jackson, actually make him a passer that he's actually good at, by the way, full disclosure. So I think Baltimore is definitely, I will say this. One of the reasons why you would probably want to maybe make them a playoff team is because of how they play in the playoffs. That would be the reason for putting them in the playoffs if you don't feel like they're a Super Bowl contender. But it's playoff and Super
True,
Bowl.
but Derrick Henry. I mean, you have to.
Mm-hmm.
You would think they lean on him more, and so that would kind of solve any playoff woes that they had, right? I mean, now you got Lamar Jackson and you got Derrick Henry.
Mm-hmm.
I feel bad for
not
edge
fair.
rushers on read option plays. That's not
D-line.
fair.
Interior D-line.
Oh, yeah. Oh, God.
Mm-hmm.
That's just not fair. Who do you give up contain and give Derrick Henry a big hole to run through, or do you let Lamar Jackson run all over the yard?
Right.
And not to mention all the design passing game they could do off of that. I mean, Derrick Henry in that offense is like really a nightmare scenario for the rest of the AFC.
Yep.
So here's kind of an off-topic question: which was the bigger signing, Derrick Henry to the Ravens or Saquon Barkley to the Eagles?
I think they both actually both have the same category. Actually, I think that they're both the same. It's about even for me. I think that for people that feel like Saquon is less than Henry, I get it, and one of the reasons I would probably fall into that is the injuries. But I think that the way that the Eagles operate that offense is really the same way that Derrick Henry is, to the Ravens, and it's got to be weighted with Barkley. He's going home. Like he's going home. He's going home to the Eagles, if you will. He played college ball at Penn State. He's with an offense that is very run heavy. I think it's very even with Saquon and Henry.
And they've got a coordinator in Kellen Moore who's actually really good at designing run schemes. I thought that was one of his more positive assets that he showcased, more so in Dallas, I feel like, with Zeke and Tony Pollard, kind of that two-headed backfield there. His time with the Chargers, I just felt like he was hampered by personnel. Austin Eckler, a little bit on the decline. Joshua Kelly, not great.
It was also a bit of a toxic, let's just call it for what it is. It was a bit of a toxic environment with the Chargers at that point.
Fair, absolutely. So I think this is a great opportunity for Kellen Moore to showcase that he can really build a dynamic offense with Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley. So this is, I feel like, very equal level moves there.
Yeah. Bills. I'm leaning there.
Yes.
See, I'm not actually. I'm really questionable about some of the guys that they've gotten rid of and didn't adequately replace. And the fact that Miami is in that division, I think Miami has to be considered the favorite for the playoff spot, or at least the division title. Normally I would say playoff team guaranteed, but just with some of the transactions and not replacing these receivers that they let go, they might be teetering on average in my book.
Okay, so Gage, that brings a decision to you to see whether we stay tied or whether we're putting them in the playoffs. What are we doing?
Okay, the AFC is tough. But you've got Josh Allen. I can't bet against Josh Allen. I got to go playoffs.
Okay. Now, playoff does include wild card. That's just all playoffs.
But they're fringe.
Okay. Bears.
I'm going playoff team.
You think so?
I do. Again, for me it boils. The division is influencing a lot of my choices in this exercise here, and I look at the division that the Bears are in, and really, to me, their only competition really is the Packers. I don't see
Lions.
The Vikings being. Oh shit! Yeah, never mind. Oh, all right.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm seeing them as like they have a lot of talent, but
kill the stream. Kill the stream. We gotta edit that out.
Like they have a lot of offensive talent. I don't really think they address their offensive line enough, but I still think that puts them third in their own division
at best.
Because I'm thinking Lions first, Packers second, Bears third, Vikings last. Because they don't have a quarterback other than Darnold.
Well, that was embarrassing. All right, yeah, let's do average.
You think average?
I think so.
I think that's fair.
Okay. Yeah.
They're one of those teams, just like the Falcons. I think a lot of these average teams are going to be teams that can go either direction. They're very much like the Falcons, high ceiling but low floor.
I actually think there's a fair argument of who's the highest ceiling between the Falcons and the Bears. I think there's actually a fair argument about that, because especially with where Kirk Cousins is, and we don't know what Penix is. I mean, except for it was probably a true succession plan, with Michael Penix. But I mean, they went and got the first overall pick, right? And they were still able to even lock up Rome Odunze, for as small of draft capital that they had. They were able to kind of have themselves a pretty solid draft. So, and their defense is kind of sneaky good. And I think there's an argument to be made, like the Bears defense is actually better than the Falcons. So I actually would venture to guess that the Bears ceiling is actually higher than the Falcons right now.
I was actually going to go the other way just because we don't know about Caleb Williams. Like, there's a lot of hype about Caleb Williams, but I don't see it. I like if you take all the quarterbacks taken in the first round, I think Bo Nix has a better chance of getting Rookie of the Year than Caleb Williams. And so if you look at the Falcons with Kirk Cousins, I think they have a higher ceiling than the Bears, just because I don't think Caleb Williams is going to be as good as everybody thinks he is.
I just think the Bears are overall a better team, but what's going to, I think, break the mold there is obviously quarterback. That's going to be the big one, but coaching as well. Raheem Morris does have a sample size as an NFL head coach. It wasn't great in Tampa Bay, but granted, he did not have a quarterback during that time. It was a very tumultuous time for that organization. He was the interim head coach for the Falcons in 2020, funny enough, after they fired Dan Quinn. Went to LA, won a Super Bowl there as their defensive coordinator, and very, very highly regarded during his time in Los Angeles. And just as a defensive mind overall, very highly regarded. And he's also unique in a sense that he's got experience on the offensive side of the ball as well. So I think that in terms of coaching, the Falcons have that higher advantage because Matt Eberflus does a very good job defensively, but the question is, really, on the offensive side of the ball, will Shane Waldron be able to get the most out of Caleb Williams? Shane Waldron, their offensive coordinator, he was in Seattle last year. There's just a lot of other factors that you have to really factor in between these two teams to determine which one really has the highest ceiling. And coaching is one of those same things that you have to take into account as well.
And obviously, I'm going to ask, but I'm just going to place that there.
By the way, real quick, we have breaking news. The Broncos have agreed to a contract extension with Quinn Miners.
Yes!
From Adam Schefter.
Sorry.
Broncos guard Quinn Miners.
Engage his background. You scared the crap out of me.
A 4-year deal worth $80 million.
Wow.
With $45 million in guaranteed. So we have one off the books. The belly is staying in Denver.
I might have to dip, guys. I got to make a video on Syndicate.
Whatever. Do we know what the cap hit is?
What, Mike?
We'll be here when you get back.
All right, sounds good. I'll be right back.
Do we know what the cap hit is?
Not offhand. I mean, but it's 4 years, 80 million, 20 million a year, and 40 million of it is guaranteed.
45
million, yeah, is guaranteed. And interestingly, it ties him through 2028. So he is locked up. The belly is locked up just before training camp.
So psyched.
Awesome. All right, so Panthers, are we sticking with number one pick contenders?
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, unless you want to throw them up there.
Anything that is top 3 as far as pick is a lock for number 1.
Yeah, well, and I like as far as Super Bowl contenders, I think there's only 4 legit ones, and we'll get there. But I also think there's like 3 legit number 1 pick contender teams too. Mm-hmm. So, Bengals. This one's interesting, coming off of Joe Burrow's thumb injury. Is it thumb or pinky?
Wrist.
Because what they were saying is with the surgery that he had, there's no guarantee that he will ever get full flexibility back in his wrist. I don't know how much that's going to affect his throw, but you don't know what you're going to get, like what Joe Burrow you're going to get.
I think that this is actually really easy. It's a playoff team. They're a playoff team. What would really amplify that to be a Super Bowl contender is where's Burrow at? Is where Burrow's at.
Sorry, don't mean to cut you off. Are they a playoff team though in that division?
Mm-hmm.
Because you got the Ravens, you got Browns, Steelers, depending on quarterback.
Personally, I think that the Browns take a step back this year.
Well, yeah, they got Deshaun Watson. Okay.
No, but I mean,
Nick Chubb is coming off of a serious injury.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they have Deshaun Watson, and the guy's been trash.
Yeah.
I mean, they were
stuck with Flacco, which pains me to say, but Hey, he's better than Deshaun Watson.
I mean, how many different starting quarterbacks did they have last year? You know, it's
I think
4 or 5, dude. Like, you know, and then for Flacco to come in late like that, I mean, just crazy.
Honestly,
I think they are.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I mean, for me, it's either between average or below average. I think I would probably put them in average, just because they've got a great defense. But that quarterback position is just way too, you know, unpredictable for my taste.
So Cam, your playoff, Glenn, your average.
What
for the Browns? Yeah.
No, for I'm not playoff for Browns at all.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm in the average category for the Browns, and I think that there's an argument to be made that the run that the Browns had was far more superior than what the Broncos, had for that 5-game stretch. Obviously, the Browns went to the playoffs, but like the way that it went down is like, I mean, they were just being carried by that defense and just competent, quarterback play. And I think that if there was anything that really emulated what the Broncos were doing in 2015 in terms of a run, it was that. I mean, they had competent QB play with Flacco, but the defense was carrying the entire show. And so I think that that's one of the reasons why it feels for me it's not sustainable. That kind of thing is not truly sustainable. So I think that truthfully, the Browns, if you're going to be going off of average, they're an average team.
Does Jerry Jeudy up that any with Amari Cooper?
Again,
no.
No. He does in the sense of wide receiver room, but it's still going to be carried off of that quarterback room. And it's very,
This is the one. I'm going, I think here.
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
It's
people have been putting us there, and I don't get it.
No, not even close.
I think that there's reasons why, and I think it's for engagement for 1, 2 to be toxic, and 3 they're just not ball knowers.
Well, and this is my thing, right? Like everybody's putting us saying that like we got worse. And my thing is you look at the first 3 quarters averaged throughout the entire NFL. The Broncos had the worst offense and the worst quarterback play in the first 3 quarters of every single game. And we still got 8 wins.
Yeah.
So how do we get worse? Like getting rid of Russell Wilson, who was the main culprit,
or
to that
biggest,
one of the biggest culprits to that horrible offense through the first 3 quarters of every game. We get rid of him. How did we get worse? The only position we got worse at is safety.
Yeah.
So I don't understand why
doesn't make sense.
Everybody's putting us in like the bottom 3. I don't get it.
And
I think like Cam said, we're an easy target, and it gets people talking. The league doesn't love Sean Payton.
Mm-hmm.
The Russell Wilson experiment still lingers on until probably the first snap of the season. Or at least we beat him in the home opener. It's foolish. I mean, you really lose all credibility if you think the Broncos are a number 1 pick contender.
Yeah. Well, and I think that even when you peel it back even more to what it is that we were talking about, I mean, it was still spot on. And I realized that we might be talking through orange colored glasses, but I mean, like, still, like, they basically went, if you look at it just in the way of like this, like the way that it went down was they basically went from a quarterback that never meshed with the current head coach to a quarterback and an actual team that Sean Payton wants to work with, right? So, I mean, like, again, like, how did they get worse? Like, so you really have to ask that again, like, how did they get worse? So I think that, for the Broncos, like, there's an argument. They also have a high ceiling in this because, but the thing is that the big caveat of that is just how much of that will we see with Bo Nix? If Bo Nix is able to, and it's at least been some arguments. We recently just had the conversation of Joe Burrow. Where is Bo Nix truly? If he's really like, one of the more pro-ready quarterbacks in the league, he comes in and let's just hypothetically said, I don't think he will, but let's just say hypothetically, he is the Joe Burrow of this class where he just comes in and lights a fire and, the Broncos are just humming with grease year one. What then? Like you're talking about just an absolute machine at that point, starting from year one, with the Broncos. And so that's why truly when we say the floor of this team is roughly, the floor of this team is roughly 7 to 10 and 10 to 7 right now. Like there's a reason why we quantify it that way.
I'm still trying to get around that humming with grease thing. I'm doing my best to look at it with the orange and blue glasses off. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that the Broncos are terrible, but I'm not saying that they're great either. Like, there are holes on this roster.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't come into the season with more holes than we started it with, right? Or this offseason. We don't have more holes than we had before the offseason, except for safety. But I think the position groups that they're knocking us for aren't that they're bad. It's that we don't know. Like when you look at the wide receivers, we have a pretty good idea about Cortland Sutton. But with Troy Franklin, Tim Patrick, Marvin Mims, we don't know.
Edge rushers. Yeah, it's a bunch of true unknowns in that.
Yeah.
So before we jump to our next team, just real quick, to circle back on Brandon Ayuk, let's hypothetically say they put Ayuk on this team.
I thought you were going to do breaking news. They
No.
made a trade.
No.
I thought that's what the breaking news was.
We'll
gonna
never
be.
get Gage back.
But since we just talked about Brandon Ayuk, though, you put him on this team. Where would that put the Broncos then at that point?
Average.
Still?
Yeah, he's listen,
I think so,
he's been an impact player just the last couple seasons, but earlier in his career, he was kind of considered, somewhat of a bust as a first round pick, and then he's really obviously come along, and I'm not being critical of him. I'm just saying, like, it just, it was not lighting the world on fire from day one. And the compensation from a pick standpoint and from a money standpoint just doesn't make sense. Like this deal is exciting to me because we're not pissing away money on unnecessary players for positions that we probably can get by with. And we still have Pat Surtain to take care of, and he's going to be certainly making more per season than Quinn just got. I'd rather take care of those two guys and make do with what we got in the wide receiver room.
So this is obviously I've basically made it known that I do want Brandon Ayuk, but this will actually be a bit of a surprise. I think it doesn't change things. I still think that they would put it into the average team. That said, though, I will just say this. I don't think the Broncos, if they're making a move like that and trading for Brandon Ayuk, would feel like they themselves are an average football team. Like you're making that move strictly with the idea that you are going to be a playoff team, with him and, going forward. So I think it doesn't change things as far as, with who they are.
Well, I think this year is the year that we find out who we're going to keep and who we're not.
Great.
Right? Like last year,
1,000%.
Last year we had awful quarterback play. So you had no idea how any of these receivers, running backs, linemen are going to do, right? I think this year, whether it's Stidham or whether it's Nix, obviously I think Nix is more accurate, but Stidham is also accurate as well. The one thing we didn't have last year was an accurate quarterback. So I think this year is going to be the year where we find out where the wide receivers stand. If we have a number one, if we have a bunch of number threes, if we got a bunch of number twos, this is going to be the year we figure that out, whatever quarterback starts.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, sorry to circle back, but since we had the conversation.
Cowboys. Ding. I mean, you have to think, right?
Boy, this is a hot take.
I'm not saying they're going to.
Haven't we been here before? And when I mean before, like every year.
I'm just saying, like, I don't think they're going to win in the playoffs, but I think they'll make the playoffs.
So this, oh boy, I don't want to make it seem like this is a hot take, but
Do it.
the
hottest of takes. That's what we're looking for.
Well, from like the view of like,
I'm gonna clickbait the crap out of it. Let's go.
They do make the playoffs every year, but they don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
So, on the surface, they make the playoffs. Sure, they're a playoff contender.
And to be fair, they don't have Dan Quinn anymore.
Yes, but there's an argument because of what they've done in the playoffs. Truly, they really are kind of an average football team, like, so I think that there's an argument to be made that the Dallas Cowboys are all, bark and no bite.
But remember, playoffs includes all playoffs, including wild cards. So they could be average and still be a wild card team.
So
the question is, do they make the playoffs or not?
I think the Cowboys are an average football team, to be honest.
I agree with that, actually. I mean, we can, what we could do, Mike, is if we could review the Cowboys' positioning at the end once we see the other NFC teams that we have slated for playoffs. But I mean, I would think that the Eagles should run away with that division in massive form.
Yeah. All right. So I'm just going to speed this up just a little bit.
Yeah, let's do it.
So I'm going to bing and bing and bing.
Okay.
Accurate?
What about the Texans?
Well, I don't know.
Okay.
Are they that's one? These are like the for sures. Like, we know that these four are Super Bowl contenders.
And you have it 2-2, which is interesting too. Like, it's nice how that worked out.
2-2.
AFC, NFC.
Oh yeah.
I think for right now, I will put a Houston at playoff team, but I think if you actually looked at it from the ceiling perspective, I think Houston probably is one of the highest ceiling teams. That's from the playoff teams to even the Super Bowl contenders to be a true Super Bowl contender. So,
what's so funny?
Yeah,
but I have teams.
I snuck the Raiders on there.
But
Patriots too.
But I have Houston as a.
Oh yeah. There we go.
There you go. That's better.
Is that fair? The only reason I put the Raiders there is because, going from interim head coach to head coach doesn't usually work out.
What about the Giants?
And they don't really have. Well, that was the other question.
That was my next one.
They don't have a quarterback. Like, they got Aiden O'Connell, but have you guys watched the Receivers show on Netflix?
No.
Not yet.
Devontae Adams is not a fan.
Yeah, he's constantly talking about playing with Rodgers again. It's really kind of an odd, regular course of conversation.
No, we'll just go from here. What about Packers?
I think those next three, Packers, Texans, and Colts, are all playoff teams.
You think Colts?
I do.
I think.
What do you think?
I think this is when it actually gets tricky, because you're gonna get into a territory of some of the average teams, like as we have here with the Cowboys, are playoff contenders. So, but I mean, like,
you think you can just jump back in whenever you want?
But I do think the Colts are playoff contenders. I think but I think right now, based on where things are with Anthony Richardson and still his health, I think they're average. But I also will quantify this that depending on where Anthony Richardson is in his health, they could be a dark horse Super Bowl contender.
Okay, so Gage, I sped it up real quick and just filled in a bunch of stuff. Any arguments on any of the teams that are on there right now?
No, not at all, actually.
Okay, Giants, you think number one pick contender?
Yes, very much so.
I had the Raiders down there, and then Glenn laughed, so I put them up to below average.
It was very snarky. I think that's what.
In fact, I think Giants and Patriots are like my top 2 teams for number 1 pick contenders. Commanders are the only one I'd maybe bump up, but that's just me. Everything else, I pretty much am right there with you.
We should be truly toxic and put the Jets at number 1 pick toward.
I was thinking about it. So you think Commanders are below average?
Yes, I do. I think that they're going to have a few wins. I think Jaden Daniels is going to net them a couple of wins. But again, if you guys feel like they deserve to be number 1 pick contenders,
I just put them there, and nobody argued.
I mean, my argument's only small, so I wouldn't be upset if they were down there.
Well, they did add some good free agents, and they had a really good draft. So I mean,
well, and they got a defensive-minded head coach to add to that defense. So I could see it.
And it's not like we're really promoting him so much. We're putting him in below average.
Right, yeah. Exactly. I mean, I don't think they're going to be playoff contenders or anything like that.
Yeah.
So Colts here.
I'm still in favor of bumping them up.
I honestly am too.
Yeah, I would put them in playoff.
They're heavy contenders. If nothing else, I think they're heavy contenders because of that division. I think that division has the Texans are the number 1 favorite, but I still think that any one of those other teams could easily be a surprise team.
Honestly, the hardest one to gauge, pun intended, the hardest one to figure out with that division is our next one, because you could say they're the Chargers of that division. Because
who else is in this? Sorry, who else is in that division?
Tennessee.
Oh yeah, okay. I was like Bills. No, that's not it. Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
I'm assuming it's between these two, right?
No.
Or are we thinking down here?
I put average on Jacksonville.
No, it's playoff or average for the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah.
These two.
Yeah.
Okay, so
in fact, I think the next 2 are average, but that's just me.
I probably will put for right now the Jaguars at average, but I think they do teeter somewhat on playoff as well. But
who says playoffs for Jags?
Me, fringe. So I think average is actually fair.
Yeah, average is fair.
Average, okay.
So Gage, do you think they're the 3rd best team in their division or the 2nd?
I think them and the Colts are kind of neck and neck right now. They kind of both have some question marks. Anthony Richardson, can he stay healthy? Can he continue that trajectory and showcase that he can be the guy? And then with Jacksonville, Trevor Lawrence, he got injured at the end of last year and just was not the same player after that injury. They've had some kind of questionable coaching at times last year. I feel like coaching kind of let them down at times. Doug Peterson is one of those more highly regarded ones, but absolutely. Doug Peterson is one of the more highly regarded coaches out there, but I feel like the coaching in Jacksonville is a little bit questionable. So right now, I don't know, man. I'm going to say average, but they could be a playoff team if they hit their ceiling.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure if I'd broken it down into like fringe teams, they'd be in there.
Yeah.
But I didn't. So, Chargers.
Chargers are average.
Below average.
Ooh.
I have Chargers
below. Explain.
I think that roster just is not quite in a state where they're going to be in a position to contend. I think that they need to add some more pieces to that weaponry. Their offensive line's quite solid. Defensively, they're kind of recovering from Brandon Staley, so they have some issues there to say the least.
Well,
I feel like.
And who do they have at running back and wide receiver now?
So running back, it's going to be the tandem of Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins.
Basically
the old Ravens backfield.
Oh, the Ravens.
Yeah.
The perpetually injured duo. Yeah.
The Ravens without Lamar.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Then they've got wide receiver wise, Joshua Palmer's kind of their quasi number 1. They have former first round pick Quentin Johnston, and then Ladd McConkey, who they drafted in the second round, high in the second round this year.
Okay. So right there.
Yeah.
Oh,
exactly.
That's beautiful. Look at that. Raiders and Chargers below average. Love it.
Yeah, the reason why I say average is just because
Harbaugh.
of how much Harbaugh carries it, and And I think that he's just a phenomenal coach. So I think
if it wasn't for Harbaugh, they'd be in the number 1 pick spot.
no, they would be in below average. They wouldn't be number 1 pick, but they would be in below average if they didn't have Harbaugh.
You're too nice, Cam.
Yeah.
Rams.
Playoffs, actually. Yeah.
Playoffs.
Playoffs.
Dolphins.
Playoffs, actually.
Yep. Fringe contenders.
Vikings.
Yep.
Why do you guys think
below
the Rams are going
average.
to be? Why do you guys think the Rams are going to make the playoffs?
Because I highly believe in Matthew Stafford. I really think Matthew Stafford is one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL that doesn't get enough love. I think Sean McVay is an elite coach. I think that Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, they've got some really good weaponry there. Kyron Williams in the backfield, Blake Corum, a rookie they drafted. Defensively, yeah, they lost the greatest player in the league, but that definitely is going to hurt. But I still feel like they've got some good young pieces on that defensive unit. They were a really good team last year, and I think that they've only got room to grow this year.
Okay.
Yeah, and to further that with Kupp and Nacua, I think if they're able to have a full season of Kupp and Nacua, there's an argument they could be one of the more dominant wide receiver tandems in the entire league.
Kings.
Below.
I'm going there.
I will say average.
Sam Darnold.
Justin Jefferson.
Sam Darnold. Who's running the
Justin
ball?
Jefferson, he missed a lot of games last year. I mean, can he carry
10.
that offense single-handedly?
If he's healthy, he sure can.
Yeah.
He
Well,
did
they
those
get-
last few games of last year.
Yeah. I mean, can these quarterbacks get him the ball, though? That's the thing.
That's the question. But
Yeah.
I think that Kevin O'Connell is also one of those coaches I hold in a very high regard. And I think that he's going to get the best out of that team. So
I'm saying average for
fringe average. So I think it's fair to put him there.
Glenn, where are we?
That's average works. Yeah, that's fine.
Glenn's
I
got to
do
be our
like that.
tiebreaker.
An awful lot.
below average, actually.
No argument from me.
See that Vikings here and Saints there. I don't get that one.
Vikings are better than
Coaching
Saints.
for me. That's what it is.
And
I think
roster.
and roster. I think that the Saints have a better quarterback in Derek Carr, but overall the roster in Minnesota is better and the coaching in Minnesota is easily better.
Okay, but to be fair, and I know we're still talking about the Vikings, but to be fair, like they were in below average team with Kirk Cousins last year. And they have a worse quarterback on the roster now.
I think you could put them in below average. I mean, I wouldn't argue with it if you did.
I mean, I'm not fighting it. I'm curious as to why Saints would be below average, but Vikings would be average. Not that both are great places to be, but
Again, I just think the Saints have a better roster, or the Vikings have a better roster than the Saints.
So I will accept you putting him in below average if we're able to do the Vikings chant on our live stream.
okay, they're staying average. New York Jets.
I want to say
Number one
below
pick.
Okay, we can do
Yeah.
it. Mile high five.
That's right.
Stick the knife in a little bit deeper. New York Jets.
So I actually think this is they're an average football team, but the reason why I say that they're average is they're actually
Aaron Rodgers.
it's fringe playoff in the sense of just I don't know what we're gonna get with Rodgers this year, but their roster is so freaking good that it carries it to where it's an average football team. But yeah, so I have it average, and let's be honest, the reason why it's not a playoff contender is because of Nathaniel Hackett.
Okay.
I got to redo my Quinn Miners video, no sound.
People are watching it like,
Yep. All right. Peace, guys.
All right, man.
I might not make it back in time. So
what a quitter! All right,
I know. Later, guys.
See ya. Good luck.
Eagles.
Playoffs. I mean, division champion, the works.
Yeah,
They
do. They
Super Bowl
do.
contenders or just playoffs?
No, I don't think so.
I think they can be, but I think people are underrating Hurts right now still. But I mean, putting them at playoff contenders is fine with me.
I feel like they regressed so much last year that they almost need this as like a comeback season, and I don't know if that includes getting to an opportunity to overtake the Niners or the Lions.
Well, and who knows? This is, you got to call it for what it is, but who knows what the loss of Jason Kelce is going to do with the center position. So, they were basically relying on a new anchor of that offensive line, a new tush push center. So I think that it's going to be interesting, where it is, and I think that they kind of hit a wall. They hit a wall there. They went 10-0 and kind of hit a wall. And if they don't hit that wall when they were 10-0, oof. Yeah, it's you might be talking about a fifth member of the Super Bowl contender if they don't hit the wall.
Well, and I do want to clarify, like between these three categories right here, you could be looking at like a 2-game difference, a 3-game difference.
I agree with that.
Totally.
Like there could be like the average team could be 9-8 and be in the divisional playoffs. Like we're not saying that these are bad teams. We're not saying that these are amazing teams. Like they could be separated by only 2-3 games.
1,000%.
But I think we all know where teams stand.
That's a really good clarification there, because like that's the way you even look at rosters, because rosters are always evaluated, or a way that we always look at it is in baseball, right? Which is wins above replacement. So like how you're describing that is almost like wins above replacement from this standpoint, because, there are certain rosters and stuff like that do carry it just a bit more by just a couple extra wins. So that's a great way to explain it.
I'm thinking there.
I might get overruled, but I kind of have them average actually. But there's
averages.
Oh, I thought you were putting them at below average. Sorry, I saw the biggest reason why is because I just think Mike Tomlin's a top 5 head coach in the NFL.
Oh, I love Mike Tomlin, but I think this is a below average team. I mean, you got Russell Wilson starting, and he's still doing the same off-season stuff. Like it's just, I've defended him over and over and over again, and now I see like what annoyed everybody. Just I feel like you can only be tone deaf so much, and I think he is going to get replaced, but I mean, can you name 10 guys on the Steelers? I think they're going to be below average. I mean,
so let me just kind of go with why I said average.
Okay.
So Pittsburgh was a playoff contention team last year, and the quarterback
they made the playoffs.
I know that's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
So as far as as much as I don't like Russell Wilson, and again, we already went through the first 3 quarters of every game. He was completely awful, but he's still a better quarterback than any of the quarterbacks that the Steelers had on the roster last year. That's the only reason why I put them in average, because I think that they have the potential to make the playoffs, but that doesn't mean that they do.
Yeah. So let me ask your definition with average. What's the record for the average football teams?
I'm thinking like 9-7 wins.
8-9, 9-8.
Yeah,
I think that's the exact definition of average.
9-8, 8-9, 7-10, somewhere in there.
I think just because of Mike Tomlin's coaching record and everything, it speaks for itself. Like that's the reason why I have it with the Steelers. So my prediction is he has his first losing season, but it's going to be the identical record that the Broncos had this last year, which is 8-9.
So I think it goes based off of like what we were talking about last year, right? Like if you win 10 games, you're in the playoffs. So I think 10 games starts the playoffs. And if you only win 6 games, everybody knows that like you're going to be like in the top 12, right? So like I think between 10 and 6 wins, that's where the average teams are.
Seahawks. This is what it gets. Does it get toxic here? It might get toxic here.
I'm putting below average.
I was thinking average, but
That's
Well,
fine.
think about this, Cam, is like we have the Niners as Super Bowl contenders. We have the Rams as a playoff team. Like, where does that fit the Seahawks in the mix here? It's
I think they're average. I don't. They're one of those probably. They might be one of those threshold teams like the Chargers, which is like they go between below average to possibly even playoff contender. But the Seahawks is just because of division. Like, division.
Well, and the entire NFC is not going to be kind to the Seahawks.
No.
When it comes to like trying to make the playoffs.
But I have them at average right now. Because I think that they're an overall better roster than the Cardinals.
Okay. So average?
Mm-hmm. But I mean, since it's still 3 though, like if you two feel like they're below average, you carry far more weight because that's 2 over 1.
He just said you were fat, Mike.
I know. I can see average. I think I put him in below average just because I hate the Seahawks. But I mean, I can see putting him in average because I definitely can see the Seahawks being better than the Raiders, Commanders, and Cardinals. So I could see it.
Dude, if we lose to the Seahawks in game 1,
I will
take that as absolutely a devastating loss. I mean,
yep.
That's how I gauge it. This would be so bad if we lose to the Seahawks to start the season.
Bucks.
Playoffs.
I mean, you kind of have to, right? Or are we going average?
No, you got to do playoffs.
They're my division winner, so I'll just clarify that they're my division winners for their playoff right now.
Just think about it, Mike. We don't have anyone from that division in the playoff row or higher, so they've got to be up there.
Yeah. Titans.
This is actually interesting for me. They might be one of the most improved teams based on what they did in the offseason.
Really?
But
really?
Letting Derrick Henry go?
But
I didn't put him there.
But it wasn't enough to move them to average by any means.
I think it's below average.
Below average, or we go a number 1 pick?
Below average.
Because not really any good options at wide receiver. You don't have Derrick Henry anymore. Will Levis is new head coach.
Well, the reason why
sucks. Like what?
The reason why I say that they were probably one of the more under the radar teams as far as all the different moves and upgrades that they were able to make. But the thing is if you look at it just truly as a whole, the upgrades that they made, it'd be a great fantasy football roster back in 2017.
Well, this team reminds me a lot of this team.
I wouldn't go that far. But
just how the team is being managed.
Managed. Okay, yeah.
I'm not.
And again, I mean, they could potentially have 6 losses in their division alone.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So are we happy with how it is, or do we want to move anybody? Second thoughts. Now is the time to fix it if you see something you don't like, and we can bring up anything. It doesn't matter.
No, I actually wouldn't change a thing right now. I
guess I have to live with the Seahawks being an average. But other than that, I think we're good.
Here, I will at least have you feel good knowing the fact that I have the Broncos winning the Seahawks matchup. So
good. Me too.
Yeah.
All right, that works. Okay. The only 2 that I would question, and again, we already talked about that one, but I'll leave them there, is that one.
Pittsburgh? Oh, I was thinking Pittsburgh.
Well, and that one can go either way, but this one,
it's about the roster for me. The roster is just so good.
Yeah, but they were so bad last year. And Aaron Rodgers is 40 years old coming off an Achilles.
But that's the reason, like, why they were so rough. Like, was Aaron Rodgers wasn't there. He was a few snaps in and the season was shot.
Okay. All right.
And they also had QB3, Broncos QB3 as starting quarterback.
For now. All right. So that is our ranking. I like that. I think that is
That's fun.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, you'll have to do a screen grab and tweet it from the either the MHRT.
Yeah, I'm going to download it and put it up on it up on social medias. But I think that's fair. I don't think we screwed anybody over. Did we? Maybe the Raiders. But
I don't know. Based on in the neck of the woods where Glenn is, the Patriots fans might actually, disagree with the fact we have him as a top 3 pick.
Drake May, no.
I don't think anyone cares right now.
Okay,
so we're more worried about Belichick's girlfriend.
So so we can clarify things. If anybody brings anything up, I want to talk Raiders a little bit. Sure. Is it fair to put the Raiders below average? Or should we move them up to average?
No. What makes them average, Mike?
Oh, well, I don't know. Like, there's a lot of question marks on the Broncos, but we put them as average. There's a lot of question marks on the Raiders, but we put them as below average. That's why I'm asking.
I mean, Dylan Laube.
Thoughts on the Raiders and why we would put them on below average?
You say Dylan Laube might be the reason
Dylan
why.
Laube, yeah. As a Josh Jacobs replacement.
Because I was talking to Bill.
I'm comfortable with this based on their quarterback situation.
Yeah, well, and I was talking to Bill the other day because we were talking Raiders and Broncos, and I said if you look at what is it, Aiden O'Connell? If you look at Aiden O'Connell, he compares pretty favorably to Jarrett Stidham. Like, they look kind of like, you could say no you want, but look at it. I'm telling you, like their play is similar. I think right now their ceilings are similar. I think their floors are similar. I don't think he's a bad quarterback, but I don't think he's a great quarterback either. I think he's one of those guys that can fill in a pinch, but he's not going to be your starter.
I actually have a very I am not to truly be toxic with Raiders fans, but there actually is an argument to be made that they could be number 1 pick.
Well, and that's why I'm asking, so that we can clear, because the Wild Wild West is coming up, and we're going to have somebody say something about where we ranked them. So we talked about the Chargers, we talked about the Commanders. We don't need to talk about the Chiefs. Everybody already knows. We don't got to talk about them. But we haven't really said anything about the Raiders. So why would the Raiders be a below average team and not an average team?
Because the whole point of being an average football team is being a threshold possible playoff contender, and sitting at about 8-9, 9-8, and the Raiders will not be an 8-9, 9-8, 9-8 football team.
Yeah, I think the loss of Josh Jacobs and Hunter Renfrow is going to screw them over.
Specifically, Josh Jacobs.
Yep.
Isn't Hunter Renfrow still available?
He is, yeah.
Yeah, he's still available.
I don't understand this at all.
There actually were some rumblings, according to like Bleacher Report that came out, where they were linking an idea of Hunter Renfrow with the Broncos, which, funny enough, actually, it does fit like a Sean
catches
Payton.
Everything. He's like a Wes Welker. He'd be perfect.
Yeah. So
yeah. So
oh my gosh, I would take him in a heartbeat.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and
not a 13 million.
Yeah. Well, this is one of those reasons why I put him below average, because you look at last year and how much Aiden O'Connell struggled getting the ball out to the receivers. There was a lot of struggle there. And now you take away Josh Jacobs and Hunter Renfrow, so you give him less options.
And so, I'm just going to say this too. If the rumblings are true right now in the last 24 to 48 hours about the Devontae Adams stuff,
He's not happy.
And reuniting with Aaron Rodgers. Guarantee you right now, that will very, very clearly put me in the Raiders are a number 1 pick territory.
Yeah.
Oof.
Oh. Okay. Any
I
more?
want to see Shadur
clarifications?
Sanders in a Raider uniform.
I don't think he's going to be the number 1 overall pick, though.
No.
I certainly wouldn't want to see Travis Hunter in that uniform.
No.
But to be
I'm not
fair,
a-
everybody's
fan, but I'm-
overrating Colorado anyway, so it's fine.
Right.
Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I feel attacked.
I'm just saying, like, you look at where everybody rated, like Colorado, like look at NCAA.
Yeah.
Like they put them at like an 87 overall. They won 4 games.
But a lot of that is popularity, Dion, and
I understand that, but Dion on the team doesn't make them play better. They won 4
Dude,
games.
it was the first game of the season that really took everybody by storm, quite honestly.
But this is coming from 2 Huskers fans. So take it with a grain of salt. I'm just saying.
Believe me, I take most of what you guys say.
Wow. All right. And any other team that we need to talk about, discuss, or are we good?
We're good.
so.
Okay.
Well, I was just going to
Go
say,
ahead, Cam.
based on below average, is there a team that you could actually maybe predict will be an average football team
Commanders.
this year?
Commanders would be the only team I think would be an average team.
I'm just worried about the call you're going to get from Bill right after the show, Mike, as the number 1 Chargers fan, that we put him in below average. I just feel like you better carve out.
To be fair, I started it down at number 1 pick and moved him up. So
Yeah.
I'm saying Chargers as far as below the average.
below the average.
Yeah.
I just don't see the roster. Like I know that Harbaugh is a good coach.
Mm-hmm.
Like we've seen that. He just doesn't have the pieces on the team. It doesn't make any sense. Like when he went to the Super Bowl with the Niners, they had pieces on that team, which is why they made the Super Bowl. I don't see those pieces on the Chargers right now.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't have the cap space to make any big moves.
Yeah.
All right. So we've covered, I think, everything. Plus we got Quinn Miners getting an extension. We ranked all the teams in the NFL. I think this has been a pretty good show, and I'm glad we came back. It's been nice.
For having a hiatus there for a little bit, this really was a good show. And obviously we'll do more of a Quinn Miners discussion with his extension tomorrow on mainly and everything. But yeah, it was a lot of fun.
We'll figure out Twitter too. I'll get that figured out.
Okay.
Just throwing that out there. All right. I think that about does it. We appreciate every single person that joined us in the show. It's always great to see you guys in the chat. Biggie Bronco Sports Nonsense. We had Graham in here. Who else do we have? Spence, Ty.
Hi.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. Make sure that you hit that like button. You hit that subscribe button. That is the easiest way and the freest way. Freest? Is that a word? The most free. Does that work? Whatever. You don't have to do nothing but click. There. We'll go with that. All you got to do is click. We would greatly appreciate it. We love the Broncos. We love Broncos country for the most part. We will see you guys later. We got training camp coming up, so don't miss that. Peace.
Fast lane when I pass in the street, bag of money in the passenger seat. Simcoe's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down, cause the coast's racking up the flame out. So high, I might never come down, so what this